Remain there. That's where you belong.
I'm your wife, Charles. Why are you doing this to me?
The chandeliers sparkled above the grand hall, but all eyes turned when Charles suddenly kicked his wife, Eva, to the ground. Her groan echoed across the marble floor, silencing the laughter and music. He had warned her never to leave the house, never to follow him, but Eva's suspicions had led her here. She had trailed him quietly, only to catch him dining with his side chick. Humiliated, Charles puffed up his chest, striking harder in front of everyone. Not out of shame, but to impress the mistress who smirked at the scene. The crowd gasped, shocked that a man could treat his own wife like trash in public. But fate has its own way of rewriting stories. What Charles never knew was that this very moment of humiliation would open the door to something greater. Because Eva was about to meet a man who would see her worth, a man so powerful that one word from his mouth could make Charles homeless. And that very man would one day lift her from the dust and place a ring of honor on her finger. Before now, Charles and Eva were once the sweetest couple in town. When they first got married, people admired them everywhere they went. They were young, full of energy, and it seemed like nothing could ever come between them. Eva would smile whenever she walked beside Charles, holding his hand as they strolled down the street. Neighbors whispered how lucky she was. They spent their evenings laughing together, sharing meals from the same plate, and dreaming about the future. Eva believed she had found her forever. Charles would look into her eyes and promise her the world. He would say, "No matter what happens, I will always love you." And she believed him with all her heart. For a while, life truly felt like a fairy tale. They were the couple everyone wanted to be like, joyful, united, and inseparable. But as the months turned into years, the sweetness began to fade. His laughter became rare, his words sharper, and the man who once held Eva like a treasure slowly turned into a stranger. At first, the changes were small. Charles began staying out late, coming home long after dinner. Whenever Eva asked where he had been, his answer was always the same. Work, too much. Work, too much stress. Too many late meetings. He always had an excuse. Eva tried to believe him, but deep inside, her heart was restless. She knew the man she married, the man who once laughed and played with her, was no longer the same. Whispers began to rise in her mind. What if Charles was hiding something? What if he was with another woman? But each time she pushed the thought away, reminding herself of how their love had begun. She convinced herself that Charles could never betray her. 3 months passed, and Eva received the news that should have been the happiest of her life. She was pregnant. Her heart leapt with joy. She decided to surprise her husband, hoping that maybe this news would bring back the man she once knew. That evening, she waited for Charles to return, though she knew he would come late again. When he finally walked in, tired and careless, she held back her usual questions. No, tonight she wouldn't ask why he was late. Tonight she had better news. After dinner, Eva smiled shyly and said, "Charles, guess what?" Her eyes sparkled with hope. When he didn't answer, she whispered, "We're going to have a baby." Silence filled the room. Charles didn't jump with joy. He didn't smile, didn't hug her. Instead, he sighed heavily, turned his face away and muttered, "I thought it was something important." Then he walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Eva sat frozen, her hands trembling. She had waited a year after their wedding for this blessing. She had expected tears of joy, a warm embrace, maybe even a dance in the living room, but instead her heart shattered. That night, as she lay awake beside her cold husband, her suspicions grew stronger. Something was wrong. Charles was no longer the man she thought she knew. Charles was not surprised by Eva's pregnancy. In fact, he didn't even feel joy because he was already hiding a secret of his own. Another woman was carrying his child. Her name was Clara, his ex-lover from years ago. They had once been madly in love, but life had pulled them apart. Charles moved on and eventually married Eva. Yet fate has a strange way of bringing back the past. One day, Charles ran into Clara again, and everything changed. The old spark returned, and soon they were seeing each other in secret. Their meetings grew frequent, their bond deeper, until Clara became pregnant. As the months passed, Charles' secrets grew heavier. He began returning home later and later. Sometimes it was 11 p.m., sometimes even past midnight. Each time he used the same excuse. Work, meetings, overload. But one night, Eva could no longer hold back. She stood in front of him as he entered and said, "Charles, why do you always come home this late? I called your co-workers today. They told me the company closed at 5 p.m. So where are you coming from?" Her voice trembled, but her courage was strong. Charles froze for a moment. Then his eyes flared. He stepped closer and barked, "Are you questioning me? Are you talking to me like that?" Before Eva could reply, his palm landed hard across her face. The slap rang loud in the room. Eva held her cheek, stunned. "Charles, you slapped me?" He slapped her again. And again. Then he shoved her to the ground and rained blows on her body until she cried out in pain. That night marked the beginning of something darker. From then on, every time Eva dared to ask him a question, every time she tried to confront him, Charles answered with violence. He beat her without pity, without shame, until fear began to live inside her heart. But Eva never told anyone. She never reported him. She kept her pain hidden, hoping things would change. She still believed, somewhere deep down, that the Charles she once knew, the man who once loved her, might come back. But she was wrong. That weekend, Charles dressed unusually sharp. He rarely went out on weekends, but today he was different. Neat suit, shiny shoes, his perfume filling the air. He told Eva he had a business meeting, but his eyes betrayed him. Eva didn't argue. She simply watched, quiet, her anger bottled inside. She had been beaten, mocked, and ignored for too long. Today, she wouldn't question him. Today, she had her own plan. Charles left the house confidently, thinking his wife was locked in her misery. He didn't know Eva had followed him, staying far behind, determined to uncover the truth with her own eyes. And soon she saw it. Through the glass walls of the city's most luxurious restaurant, Eva spotted Charles laughing freely, his hand resting on a lady's arm. He looked like the man she used to know. Cheerful, proud, alive. Only that joy wasn't for her, but for another woman. Eva's chest tightened, but instead of crying, she walked inside. The chandeliers glittered above the grand hall as the crowd buzzed with music and laughter. But all that noise faded when Eva stepped up to her husband's table. "Charles?" Her voice cracked. "So this is where you spend your nights?" The room fell silent. Clara smirked, leaning back with her wine glass as if enjoying a private show. Charles's face flushed, not with shame, but with fury. His pride was cornered, his lies exposed, and everyone was watching. "Eva," he growled through clenched teeth, "I warned you never to follow me." She stood firm. "I am your wife. I deserve the truth." The mistress chuckled under her breath, making it worse. Charles puffed his chest, pretending to be bold. And then, before anyone could stop him, he kicked Eva so hard she fell onto the marble floor with a painful groan. The hall froze. Glasses clinked, whispers spread, and gasps filled the air. Charles stood over her, his voice loud and sharp. "This is what happens when you disobey me." He wasn't defending himself. He was showing off, trying to impress Clara by proving his wife was beneath him. The mistress smirked proudly. The crowd, however, was horrified. Some shook their heads, some muttered under their breath, but no one confronted him. Later in the evening, as soon as they entered the house, Charles did what no one expected. "You embarrassed me tonight, Eva. You should never have followed me." Tears streamed down her face. "Charles, I only wanted to know the truth. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you treating me like I am nothing?" But Charles wasn't listening. His fury boiled over. He went into the room, grabbed her bag from the wardrobe and hurled it at her feet. "Take your things and leave my house," he roared. Eva gasped, stumbling backward. "Leave? At this hour? It's raining outside. Please, Charles. Please, I'm carrying your baby." Her voice cracked with desperation. "Don't do this to me." Charles's face grew colder. He opened the door wide and the storm outside roared into the room like a wild beast. Rain splattered across the tiles, soaking her feet. "Get out!" his voice thundered. "I don't care where you go. From tonight, you're no wife of mine." Eva fell to her knees, clutching her belly. "Charles, I beg you, don't do this to us. Don't throw me away." But Charles's hand shoved her shoulder, and she tumbled out into the rain. He tossed her bag after her, and with a final slam, the door locked behind her. Her body was weak, her heart was heavy. She stumbled onto the road, blinded by the sheets of water. Then it happened. Headlights, the screech of brakes, a deafening thud. Eva's body was flung to the ground. Pain shot through her like fire before darkness began to close in. The driver jumped out, panic in his eyes. It was a man from the event. A man who had quietly watched Charles disgrace his wife. His heart pounded as he rushed to Eva's side. "Oh my God," he gasped, lifting her limp body in his arms. The rain beat down as he carried her into his car, sped off through the flooded streets and drove straight to the hospital, where her life, though broken, was about to begin again in ways she never imagined. The sound of rain faded into the distance as the hospital doors burst open. The man carried Eva in his arms, soaked to the bone, her head resting weakly against his chest. Nurses hurried over, wheeling a stretcher. "She was hit by my car," the man said breathlessly. "Please, save her." They lifted Eva onto the stretcher and rushed her down the hallway. The man stood there for a second, staring at his trembling hands. Her blood was still on them. Something inside him ached deeply. He didn't even know her, but the look of pain on her face before she fainted would not leave his mind. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The night grew quiet. The man sat alone in the hospital corridor, his clothes still wet, his eyes fixed on the red light above the emergency room door. Finally, the doctor stepped out. "She's stable now," he said, "but—" The doctor paused, sighing softly. "She lost the baby." The man's chest tightened. He looked through the small glass window at Eva lying unconscious on the bed. Pale, broken, yet still beautiful in her own way. "She's been through something terrible," the doctor added. "You should call her family." The man nodded, but he didn't even know her name. When morning came, sunlight filtered into the room. Eva slowly opened her eyes. The white walls around her felt strange. The air smelled of disinfectant. Her hands went to her stomach. Empty. The memory returned in a rush. Charles, the rain, the push, the road, the blinding light. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her heart cracked in silence. Just then, the door opened. The man walked in, holding a cup of warm tea. He looked gentle, calm, like someone born with empathy in his eyes. "You're awake," he said softly. "Don't move too much. You need rest." Eva stared at him, confused. "Who are you?" "My name is Raymond," he replied quietly. I was the one who hit you last night. I didn't see you crossing. I'm so sorry." Her lips trembled, but she shook her head weakly. "No, it wasn't your fault." He set the tea on the table and sat beside her bed. "I spoke to the doctor. You'll be fine soon. I've taken care of the bills." Her eyes widened. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Raymond smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but no one deserves to be left alone in the rain like that." His words pierced her heart. She looked away, her tears returning. "He threw me out. My husband. He said I should never come back." Raymond lowered his head for a moment. "Then maybe God wanted you to survive that night, so you could start again." For the first time in days, Eva felt warmth in her chest. Something about his tone, calm, sincere, filled with kindness, touched her deeply. Days turned into weeks. Raymond visited her every day, bringing food, talking with her, making her laugh gently through her pain. When she was finally discharged, she had nowhere to go. Raymond didn't hesitate. "Come with me," he said, "at least till you get back on your feet." She wanted to refuse, but the sincerity in his eyes broke her defenses. So she went. Raymond's home was peaceful, not loud, not toxic. He lived alone, a man of wealth but a quiet heart. He treated her like a friend, not a burden. Slowly, the wounds in her soul began to heal. Months passed. The laughter she once lost began to return. softly like a forgotten melody. Raymond never once asked her for anything. He respected her space, gave her hope, and treated her like someone who mattered. Then one morning, he knelt before her with a ring, not just a ring of love, but of honor. "Eva," he said, his voice steady and sincere, "you've been through fire and pain, but you never lost your light. I don't want to fix your past. I just want to build your future." With me, tears filled her eyes. She looked up at him, remembering the storm, the slap, the rain, and now this man kneeling before her, choosing her when she thought she was nothing. Eva nodded slowly. Yes, I will." From that moment, her story changed forever. She became the wife of one of the most powerful men in the city, the same man who once lifted her from the dust when everyone else had turned their back. Months turned into years, and while Eva's life slowly began to bloom again, Charles's world was falling apart piece by piece. At first, everything seemed fine. He and Clara moved in together, laughing, traveling, and showing off their new love on social media. People thought they were living the dream, but behind those perfect pictures, cracks were already spreading. Charles had left everything, his peace, his morals, his dignity, all for Clara. He poured money into her hands without thinking, buying her jewelry, designer bags, even a car. She controlled him with her charm, her sweet lies, and her fake promises. She told him she was pregnant. That news had made Charles believe he had finally found happiness again. He started planning a small traditional wedding, sold one of his lands, and transferred about 20 million naira into her account for their future. But the future never came. One morning, Charles woke up to an empty house. Clara was gone. Her clothes, her shoes, even her toothbrush. Gone. At first, he thought maybe she had gone out, but when hours passed and her phone remained switched off, reality began to set in. He logged into his bank app. His heart nearly stopped. His savings were gone. 20 million naira vanished. He slumped onto the couch, trembling. That was when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Clara. He picked up immediately. "Clara, where are you? What's going on?" But a cold voice laughed on the other end. "Charles," she said, "did you really think I'd spend my life with a man who beats women? You disgust me. And oh, by the way, I was never pregnant." Then she hung up. That one sentence broke him completely. Days turned into weeks, and Charles lost control of everything. He stopped going to work regularly, and rumors began to spread through the company. The management demoted him from assistant manager to junior supervisor after several mistakes. He started drinking, arriving late, smelling of alcohol. The man who once bragged loudly in restaurants was now a shadow, bitter, broke, and abandoned. And fate wasn't done with him yet. 2 years had passed. Charles had grown thinner. His once smooth skin was rough, and his face carried the tiredness of too many sleepless nights. The same man who once used to polish his car every weekend now took the bus to work. He barely spoke to anyone anymore. His colleagues whispered about him in corners, how his side chick ran away with his money, how he almost lost his apartment, how karma had finally paid him a visit. But that Friday morning, the company was hosting an anniversary gala. It was one of those big events where everyone dressed in their best and important business partners were invited. Charles almost didn't want to go. He hated crowds now. But his manager insisted. He wore his old blue suit, the one that barely fit anymore, and went quietly. The large conference room of Allura Holdings regional headquarters smelled of money and quiet power. Polished glass walls reflected the soft glow of ceiling lights. A long oval table stretched across the room, surrounded by tall black chairs. Each chair had a name tag in front of it. Managers, assistant managers, regional supervisors, directors, all summoned for the company's annual general review. At the far end of the table, On a slightly raised platform sat Mr. Raymond, the billionaire founder and CEO. Beside him, poised and graceful, sat his wife, Mrs. Eva Raymond, his most trusted partner and the company's general assistant. Eva looked strikingly elegant in a cream-colored blazer and pencil skirt, her hair neatly styled, her skin glowing against the golden hue of the light. Her composure carried quiet authority, not arrogance, but the calm of someone who had fought battles and come out refined. She sat beside her husband, reviewing documents with him before the meeting began. He leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She smiled faintly, nodding. Then the door opened. A tall, lean man stepped in, holding a brown file. He looked slightly nervous, like someone trying too hard to appear confident. His suit was worn out, his tie crooked, his eyes tired. Charles. He had been transferred from a smaller branch as an acting assistant manager. He had been struggling to rebuild his life after Clara ran away with his money. 20 million naira gone overnight. Now his only hope was this job. He walked in quietly, unaware of what was waiting for him. Eva's pen stopped midair. Her hand trembled slightly. Her eyes lifted and met his. Time froze. Charles's steps slowed. He blinked once, twice, his brain trying to process what his eyes were seeing. The woman sitting beside the CEO, elegant, respected, untouchable, looked exactly like his ex-wife, but this couldn't be. He stared harder, the jawline, the eyes, the calmness. It was her. His lips parted slightly. His hands began to shake. The file in his grip almost slipped. Eva's chest rose and fell slowly. Her fingers tightened around her pen, but her face didn't break. She kept her expression neutral, professional. Only her eyes betrayed the flood of emotions inside. Mr. Alman looked up at the sudden silence. Greater than, yes? You must be the assistant manager from the Lagos branch, he said warmly. Please take a seat. Charles swallowed hard, his voice barely escaping his throat. Greater than, yes, sir. Thank you. He sat down, 3 seats away from her, his heart pounding so loudly he could barely hear the rest of the introductions. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward her. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The same woman he had thrown into the rain, the same woman he had kicked out and left for dead, now sitting beside a billionaire as his wife. Charles looked down, humiliated. Tears stung his eyes. He couldn't believe he was hearing those words. After the meeting, as people started leaving, Charles stayed behind, pretending to fix his documents. He was shaking. Eva stood beside her husband, collecting her files. Then slowly she turned toward him. Their eyes met again, this time closer. Her gaze was calm but heavy with meaning. He whispered under his breath, barely audible, "Greater than Eva." She didn't reply. She looked at him one last time, her eyes soft but firm, then turned and walked out beside her husband. The woman he once rejected had become the very person sitting next to his new boss. The woman who now had power, respect, and peace. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move. If you were Eva, what would you do to him? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe for more interesting stories.